You've written an article. It's at top of my feed right now. It's Seb Gorka on Twitter. Mueller's report ends witch hunt, but what's about to unfold is the real story. Talk to us. You've already, of course, because, you are one of the handful of investigative journalists left in America. You've already gone through the key aspects of the report. What's important that we know about it? And the flip side, the question we don't cover enough, what's missing, Sarah?
Oh, well, what's important and what we do know about it, to start off with first, that there was no collusion and there was no case for obstruction of justice. End of point. That was it. That is what Robert Mueller delivered. That is what Attorney General Barr stated in his press conference earlier today. And people can scour through the report those that are desperate to try to find something. But in the end, the conclusion was straightforward. There was absolutely no evidence of collusion. Let's just begin there. Now, what was left out of the report is significant, Sebastian, because there was so much that still needs to be investigated. We do know that Attorney General Barr is conducting their own investigation with the DOJ into how this all transpired, which was the very origination of the investigation into President Trump, then candidate Trump, and the alleged, now debunked collusion with Russia. That's going to be important. We also know that Inspector General Michael Horowitz is actually investigating the FBI's, what I would call, and I've said over and over again, malfeasance within the FBI and officials within the DOJ with regard to the investigation. I thought what was most fascinating and what sources within the intelligence community and officials very heavily involved and connected to what was going on with this investigation said was the fact of what was left out. Now, what was left out of the report was any of the type of relationships that Hillary Clinton, as well as the DNC and others had with Christopher Steele and all of the environment that was involved in making this report come to light. For example, they talk about Carter Page in the report. This is one quick example. They talk about Carter Page in the report, but the FBI never admits, or Mueller doesn't ever discuss, talking about how Carter Page was an essential component to previous investigations, that he was actually a source for them on previous investigations into Russia.
He'd assisted the FBI in catching bad guys.
Absolutely, absolutely. So even the whole predicate, by the way, of this report was based off of fruit of the poisonous tree. There was no evidence ever that the Trump campaign or members of the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. They tried to build a case based on very flimsy circumstantial relationships or meetings with people, which, by the way, were mostly people like Stefan Halper and Joseph Misfud and others who were connected to the FBI and connected to our U.S. intelligence. So we can't even trust that. People are saying they were set up. That was another thing.
This is one of the massive aspects of the story, like the unmasking, that is not getting due attention. That what we are looking at here, in all likelihood, is the attempt by the Obama administration to insert multiple assets into the campaign to create a predicate for a counterintelligence action. So they were actually attempting to undermine the campaign, but it failed again and again. She is Sara Carter. She's with us for one more segment. We are back with Sara Carter. Sara, we have had all kinds of analysis today or here on America First, but I'd like you to get your crystal ball out. What happens next? And specifically, what happens next with an organization that's really, very strangely, stayed out of the news and out of the report for far too long, and that's Fusion GPS?
Oh, I'm so grateful you brought up Fusion GPS, because it should be on the forefront of the news in every publication. Fusion GPS was the now embattled research firm run by Glenn Simpson, a former Wall Street Journal reporter that was paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee through Perkins Coie, their attorneys. It was a cutout to pay them to hire Christopher Steele, the former British spy that basically put together and compiled the anti-Trump, now totally debunked dossier on the president that basically was used as the bulk of evidence to get a warrant to spy on Carter Page. I believe there have been other FISA warrants out there, and I think investigations will reveal that in the future, possibly one on George Papadopoulos. But let's talk a little bit about Fusion GPS. In the report, they talk about the meeting that took place in Trump Tower. Now, that was the meeting, as people will remember, your listeners, where Donald Trump Jr. and others had met with Natalia Veselnitskaya. She was a Russian lawyer who came to talk. Eventually, we realized she was talking about adoptions and things that she wanted changed. What was so fascinating and what was left out of the report is the fact that Glenn Simpson had met with Natasha Veselnitskaya the day before the meeting and the day after the meeting. And during his testimony, he admits to this and then tries to say, well, we weren't talking about Donald Trump Jr. and the meeting that took place in Trump Tower. And the reason this is so important is because, remember, everything that happened to the Trump campaign, all of what were seemingly coincidences later appeared and were discovered by Congress during their investigations and during John Solomon and I's investigation, appeared to be constructed and managed by the FBI and the DOJ and Fusion GPS. All of these people were connected. And remember, it was Fusion GPS who we have discovered over and over again planting the seeds of these false stories in mainstream media outlets such as McClatchy. We saw it with the story on Michael Cohen, where he was supposedly in Prague. There is absolutely no evidence that Michael Cohen was ever in Prague.
Right.
In fact, the day that they said he was in Prague, he's in a picture with his daughter at a restaurant somewhere in Virginia. So there's no way that he was there on the day that they said. So there's so many aspects of this story that still need to be investigated, Sebastian. And I think what we're going to see in the near future is it unravel at an extraordinary rate. I was told by a source it's going to be an avalanche of information. Another thing that I think is very
where
important
from?
is
where
that,
from? Is it going to be from the DOJ under Barr or from?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, from the DOJ under Barr and from Michael Horowitz,
yes,
who, remember, has been conducting a long-time investigation right now into this, and his report is expected to come out in May or June.
Let me ask you one last question. What does all this mean, or what should this all mean, Sara Carter, for General Mike Flynn?
Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was the extraordinary victim of all of this malfeasance. I hope that after all this information is discovered and after all that is revealed, that his case is either thrown out because it was based on false information to begin with, or that something happens to help exonerate Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. I think he was trapped in the middle of such an egregious and vicious situation between President Trump and those that hated him. And he remember, he was the first person they wanted to knock out. And why did they want to knock him out and get him out of the game? Because basically, as many sources have told me, he knew where all the bodies were buried. He was part of the Obama administration for a long time. He was, head of the DIA.
Yes.
He had openly spoken out against President Obama and what he believed was changing the narrative for the American people. He is a true American hero, dedicated a lot of his life, almost all of his life, to the United States military, and his work was exemplary. We would have never been able to get al-Qaeda in Iraq or even in Afghanistan without the help of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. And I know he's going through an extraordinary, difficult time now, talking to sources. He's more than $6 million right now in the hole from his defense. And I think that the true story will come out about what happened to Flynn. Unfortunately, the last few years, he and his family have suffered quite a bit.
Well, our prayers are with him. He needs to be exonerated. He hasn't been sentenced yet, so there is hope still. We have been talking to Sara Carter. Follow her, Sara Carter, DC.